Is the LDS Church a church, or is it really a business? I want to talk about the side businesses that the LDS Church is involved with and let you decide for yourself. I was recently in Salt Lake City, and I stopped by the City Creek Center. That's the luxury mall that was built and owned by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And I noticed something that I unfortunately neglected to take a picture of, but it was in their elevator. Floors 1 and 2 were for the shops and businesses, but there was a floor 3 with this unassuming label Property Reserve, but which required a badge to scan to even go to that floor. If you're going to learn about the LDS Church's money, Property Reserve is a good place to start. That's their main real estate company, which owns the City Creek Center, as well as apartment complexes throughout Salt Lake City and other properties across the country and even in other countries now. We don't know exactly how much Property Reserve really owns because, as with anything money related, Jesus' church refuses to say, but we just know it's a lot. I mean, look at these deals that they have made that we know of. We don't know of any of these deals because the church itself was open and honest about it. No, it's because of some other source, such as some of them, it's the other party of the deal who is being open and honest about it, or some of them are publicly available knowledge, such as with Covent Gardens IP. That's their UK-based branch. Covent Gardens is technically a charity because apparently the UK allows for charity whose sole purpose is to make a profit for a church, which they've honestly had a hard time doing, as this article explains. It's an excellent article. I love British humor. They also have a branch in Hawaii called Hawaii Reserves. They own a bunch of land in Laie on the island of Oahu. That's where BYU Hawaii is, as well as the Polynesian Cultural Center, or PCC. That's kind of like an amusement park of sorts, where you can have fun learning about Polynesian cultures for the low price of between $90 and $290 a person. Yeah, that's a pretty penny for the privilege of witnessing colonization at its worst. And get this, they also own the city's cemetery, a shopping center, a park, campgrounds, the water company, the sewer company. Yeah, when I said they own a bunch of properties in Laie, I could have just said they own Laie. We're not done with real estate yet, though. The next company you should know about is Suburban Land Reserve. This is one that, if you follow Mormon news at all, you've probably heard about, even if you don't recognize the name. For example, remember that weird news a few years ago about the church getting rid of land that they own near Independence, Missouri? You know, where the temple city is going to be built in preparation for Jesus to come to Missouri. Mormon doctrine is so weird. Well, that was Suburban Land Reserve, which in my research seems to be the branch that handles large developments. Yeah, the church held on to that land in Missouri until they couldn't afford not to, because of all the people wanting to build there, to give them money. It was just an investment. Suburban Land Reserve was also involved in huge developments near Phoenix, Arizona, Riverton, Utah, and the community that was going to be surrounding the Tooele Valley, Utah temple. Remember that one? Yeah, probably not, because that's the one where the community was canceled and the temple moved to a different location as a result of successful community pushback. So that's the real estate business. Are you dizzy yet? Because we're just getting started. Now let's move on to their agricultural businesses, with the main one being Ag Reserves. I had no idea Ag Reserves existed until a couple of years ago, because I do this, and I research the church, and I just happened across it. I had no idea it existed when I was an active believing member, but they are huge. They've been around since 1950 and now farm practically everything, bringing in hundreds of millions of dollars annually. This site estimates that they bring in $650,000 a day, but that's just the farming itself. Ag Reserves doesn't own the land. No, that's the other half of the church's agricultural business. Farmland Reserve owns the land. They're like the farming version of Property Reserve, which we talked about a minute ago. They're making news lately simply for catching people's attention for buying everything they can, continually beating out other competitors like China and Bill Gates. They now own 2 counties worth of land in Nebraska alone, beating out the little guys, people who would love to own their own farm, but now have no choice but to lease a farm from the church. And it's not just Nebraska. Farmland Reserve is also the #1 owner of farmland in Illinois, and they, along with Property Reserve, make the church the top private landowner overall of the state of Florida. Yeah, the church owns about 1/50th of Florida's landmass. A good chunk of that land in Florida is a subsidiary of Farmland Reserves, Deseret Ranches, the nation's largest cattle ranch as far as the head of cattle. They have 44,000 head of beef cattle. Yeah, has anyone found it weird that church leaders seem to ignore that verse in the Word of Wisdom that says to eat meat sparingly? Well, it's kind of like back when the church used to have a problem with wine bibbers, especially in southern Utah where the church had a very successful wine company. Did you know that? Yeah, they were so proud of their wine, they put some of it in the cornerstone of the St. George Temple at its original dedication. But now instead of wine, it's meat, because like wine, meat is profitable and delicious. But even more profitable, apparently, would be to sell a lot of that land to developers, kind of like they're doing in Missouri, because there are a lot of people who would like to expand the city of Orlando. And Farmland Reserve wants to annex 52,000 acres of their land to the city of Orlando, which, if successful, would expand Orlando's footprint by 60%. As of last week, however, it's not going according to plan. Shucks. Who knows, maybe they'll revert back to their original plan of building their own massive city next to and rivaling Orlando. So those are the for-profit companies you might not have known about. Let's not forget about the ones you do, such as Deseret Book, the LDS bookstore, which a while back bought out their only real competitor, Siegel Book, which means they have a monopoly in that niche industry. But niche or not, it's not a small business. Estimates I'm finding online say they bring in somewhere between $25 and $180 million a year, which makes sense considering all the homes I have personally been in that have shelves filled with books, all from Deseret Book. Then, if you've ever visited Temple Square, you might have eaten at one of the restaurants managed by the Temple Square Hospitality Corporation. That's the parent company that manages the Lion House Pantry, the Nauvoo, as well as the luxury restaurant overlooking the Salt Lake City Temple from above called The Roof. They also do catering for parties, weddings, business events, you name it, except that they're all temporarily closed right now due to the renovations happening at Temple Square. There's also their newspaper, Deseret News, which is admittedly not as big as it used to be back in the days of physical newspapers. They have since been overshadowed by another church-owned news organization, KSL, which, if you live in Utah, you are very familiar with, whether you like it or not. You see, in Utah, we don't have NPR or CBS radio, we have KSL radio. In Utah, we don't buy things off of Craigslist or Facebook classifieds. Why would you do that when you have KSL classified? Seriously, that's what people use here. And in the morning, when your parents are getting ready while watching Fox News or CNN, our parents are watching the news on KSL TV. Yeah, KSL controls news cycles here. They are huge. Even if you don't live in Utah, if you've ever visited as a tourist, you might have at one point ended up on their sister company's website, utah.com. Yes, the church owns and manages Utah's biggest tourism website as well. A minute ago, I mentioned KSL Radio. You should know that that's not the only LDS church-owned radio station, not in the slightest. Through their broadcasting company, Bonneville International, they also own radio stations that are, yes, some in Utah, but also in Sacramento, Phoenix, Denver, Seattle, San Francisco. Chances are, if you're a regular radio listener, at some point you have ended up listening to an LDS church-owned radio station and didn't even know it. Now let's move on to insurance companies. Are we having fun yet? The Beneficial Life Insurance Company was founded over a century ago now, so I'm sure it was scary for church leaders to see the 2008 recession kill it. Almost. It would have gone under if it weren't for the church's $100 billion fund. Remember that? Bailing out Beneficial Life was one of the two for-profit causes that not-for-profit money went to, according to the leak that was now 5 years ago. Can you believe it's been that long? They also have a health insurance company, Deseret Mutual Benefit Administrators, or DMBA, but this is technically not-for-profit that only covers church employees. But as I've demonstrated, that's a lot of people. Let me tell you, I work in healthcare in Utah, and getting on DMBA panels is competitive. It's a big deal here. But since they cover church employees, their website has a pretty good list of practically all of these for-profit companies that we have been talking about in this video, just in case anyone else wants to, go and do your own research. Or you could go to DeseretManagement.com. That's the parent company for many, but not all of these companies. So that's a summary of the for-profit companies that I can find. We haven't even talked about their not-for-profit companies, such as their thrift stores, Deseret Industries, or their university campuses in Utah, Idaho, and Hawaii. They also, of course, bring in several billions of dollars of cash a year in tithing revenue. And, of course, let's not forget Ensign Peak Administrators, which manages the church's what used to be $100 billion fund, but which is now much more than that. How much more? We can only guess. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is made of money. They have it coming from everywhere these days. It's more money than they could ever spend on their own, and yet they still continue to teach their members that their God demands more of it in tithing. Keep in mind, they're building temples galore these days, and the most common theme of General Conference now always seems to be temple covenants. Why? Well, what's arguably the most important requirement for obtaining a temple recommend? Yep, tithing. Even the temples are yet another financial investment. But, one more thing, tithing wasn't always a strict requirement, and the church wasn't always made of money. Tithing was made a strict requirement when the church was in great amounts of debt. It was actually the church's debt itself that was the driving reason behind making tithing a strict requirement for obtaining a temple recommend, thus tying it to your personal worthiness. After this new tactic worked, and church president Joseph F. Smith excitedly announced in General Conference that the church was finally debt-free, he then said, "At last we are in a position that we can pay as we go. We do not have to borrow anymore, and we won't have to if the Latter-day Saints continue to live their religion and observe this law of tithing. It is the law of revenue to the church. Furthermore, I want to say to you, we may not be able to reach it right away, but we expect to see the day when we will not have to ask you for $1 of donation for any purpose except that which you volunteer to give of your own accord, because we will have tithes sufficient in the storehouse of the Lord to pay for everything that is needful for the advancement of the kingdom of God." I want to live to see that day if the Lord will spare my life. It does not make any difference, though, so far as it is concerned whether I live or not. That is the true policy, the true purpose of the Lord in the management of the affairs of his church. So said the son of Hyrum Smith, in case you've forgotten who that was. That day has come. Actually, it came a long time ago now. Can you do me a favor and share this video? Or make one of your own. I don't care. But together let's pressure the church into doing the right thing, to stop taking advantage of, to stop extorting their own members of their hard-earned money that the church does not need. If Jesus were to return today and see what this church that claims to be his church is doing with money, he'd be doing worse than flipping tables.